Welcome to episode 7 of In Touch with iOS, a podcast for sharing tips, apps, and gear for iPhone and iPad, along with other technologies that gets us using iOS in a fun, productive, and meaningful way. I'm your host, David Ginsberg, and I am here with a very special guest co-host, Mr. Barry Folk. Hi, Barry. I'm so glad to have you here with me.
Hey, Dave. Thanks for having me on with you. I've been listening to you since you started this new podcast, and I'm thrilled to be your first co-host.
Well, I appreciate that, and Melissa is on vacation, so we thought, let's bring a guest in, and because there was some, a few announcements that occurred today,
Really?
actually, as we
I must
record
have
this.
missed them. Can you enlighten me?
We're going to call this episode WWDC Extravaganza because there was, I'm telling you, it was a 2.5 hour episode. I also recorded for Mac Eyes Only earlier today with Mike Potter and company. We did a reaction episode, so we'll be hearing that soon. But I wanted to give it a little further and just kind of go over some of the stuff that was announced today, specifically only iOS stuff, because that's obviously what this podcast is all about. As I said, we'll be talking about iOS, the watchOS, tvOS, and the announcements that were related to that, as well as watchOS. And there's a new iPad, I guess, was announced today, as well as we'll touch upon
2 iPads.
Was it 2 iPads?
Well, they updated one, and one is new.
Yeah, we'll hit that. And then, of course, the HomePod, which is going to be an interesting discussion here. So we'll wrap that up. So first off, obviously, this is why we're here. We talk about is iOS. And iOS 11 was released in beta today.
Did you actually install it?
Yes,
on anything?
I braved it because I have a non-production version of a device that I use. But unlike Barry, who
all 4 of my machines have now been updated,
and dealing with some of the different bugs. But you haven't had very much time to play with it because it's just like I said, just came out earlier today, so we all got it downloaded.
I can't help myself. I'll tell you right off the bat, Dave. I know I shouldn't, and like you, I should do it on a non-production device, but I'm so excited. And really, you'd think doing it year after year and dealing with some of the foibles, especially that first beta, that I'd be more cautious. But I just can't help it. And it is exciting. It really was. It was a chock-full event, lots of new announcements, and not necessarily some new mind-blowing features, but there's a lot of enhancements that are refining iOS and smoothing those rough edges, adding a few new features, learning from previous releases, and again, it's that overall feel that I think people will be thrilled with. They're maybe not going to say, "Hey, there's this one new killer feature." It's the combination of better maps, or the styling is a little bit different. I'm jumping in a little bit early here, but since you mentioned that I did install it, we haven't had much time. One of the things that I noticed was when you look at voicemails or messages, the bolding of the words, the highlighting of names, just enhances that feel. And the fact that I noticed it, I'm actually kind of surprised. Right. But it also shows that they put some thought into it, and they're trying to make it as user-friendly as possible.
Now, I think a lot of what the focus was with iOS 11 was for the iPad. There was a lot of enhancements that were added to the iPad. They didn't really touch upon iPhone at all. As I predicted this morning, I said that they weren't going to introduce an iPhone at all during this session, which I was 100% right on.
Yes, you are.
So really, the focus was on iOS 11 on iPad, and I noticed a lot of cool things. Number one that really stood out right away, and there was a rumor for it the day before, so it kind of leaked the night before, was the Files app. Mm-hmm. And what the Files app did was it brought your files together, and you're able to do a better way of being able to browse, organize, search, and organize your files. I mean, that's the biggest piece. Right. It was always such a pain to try to find files. I mean, this is also available on the iPhone, but I think the focus really is on the iPad because of just the way you're able to move the files around. Yeah,
this is one of those areas that there's probably several camps here, and I think we can all be pretty comfortable that the pre-Tim Cook era, they really didn't want to have a traditional Finder like you have on the Mac.
Exactly.
And I can see that. I mean, files can be very confusing for people, but it is a good paradigm. And by creating this Files app, which is a sort of a Finder, but it's really iOS-ified and very much for the iPad, it leverages the strength of cloud services. And it's not just iCloud. It's other third parties like Dropbox or Box, OneDrive. And that's good to see because there are many players out in the market. And by incorporating them, I think you're going to create a much stronger world of ways of accessing apps. I like at least the initial look and feel of it. Yep. It's going to take a little while to get used to, just like anything else. But to your point, David, what was lacking before is now here. So let's see what we can do to take advantage of it. So I'm very excited about it. Obviously, Apple's feeling that way because on iOS, on the iPhone side, you'll see files show up, and it showed up on my second page of the home screens, but it was actually in the dock for my iPad. So they're feeling that this is a major productivity enhancement for the iPad.
Now, and you just hit it on the head there at the dock. That again, another copy from Mac OS, because the dock's been around for quite a while on the Mac OS side of things. Now there's a dock on the iPad.
So did you know when I saw that during the keynote, and I went, well, they don't have a dock on the iPad. Well, of course they have a dock, but by changing the look to be more modal, I'm like, of course it's a dock. I just didn't think of it that way because it was just the bottom row of screens. It's condensed. You can add or remove both folders and individual apps from that. And so far, I like it. I think it's great. I was a little surprised to see files in there, but I get it because they want to highlight that as a key piece of the new OS.
Absolutely. Other thing they really added, which was really nice, is just improved upon multitasking. You can do it in multiple ways. It's more intuitive, easy to multitask around and split around. You can slide over as well as split view, which I haven't had a chance to play with yet, but we saw the demonstration today, and I was really impressed with what this can do.
Right, you've got the split view, you've got the drag and drop, you just all sorts of enhanced features, which some people could say, well, the Mac has had it, or even other mobile systems. That's true, but at least an initial look, I like the way that Apple has implemented it. I think it's going to be very user-friendly. I think it's logical, and I think it really does push the iPad, again, another leap forward into making it a very productive machine. Now, David, I know you live a lot in both worlds, and you and I both, for worse, have to deal with the Windows world at work.
Yes, we do.
But I am easily 90% plus iOS, and especially the iPad. I carry it with me everywhere. I can do most of my business work on it, and I'm thrilled with it as a machine. And if you were to say that they weren't going to update the hardware and we're only going to update the software, I've been really excited and saying, okay, that's great, because I use the 12.9-inch iPad Pro primarily, and I really like it. It's fast machine, it's rock solid, stable, and it's very productive for me. The fact that they're announcing, I know I'm jumping a little bit to the hardware side, but I think it's logical to mention it here, is they are really speccing it up. Yeah. I mean, 6 CPUs, 8 GPUs, with RAM all the way up to 512 meg, a gig, excuse me.
No, not gig.
Yeah,
that'd be a lot of RAM.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, it is 512 gig, isn't it?
Is it 512?
It is 512, I think, on the top model. Yeah, it's massive.
We'll come back to that because that's on our list to talk about.
And they are really pushing that as a professional machine, and I think that's exciting in its own right, because it is a neat machine. People are kind of there's a little bit of hesitancy, I think, that people are like, well, the growth isn't there. They're still selling a ton of units. I know from a professional perspective, in my line of work, we roll out several thousand of these every year, and people will be thrilled. Now, I'm going to talk about the smaller of the two devices that came out today, which is the same 9.7-inch form factor, essentially, but the screen is much larger, right? It's 10.5. And so it's about 20% larger. And I can see for people who like that smaller size, and that's the general feedback I get from our field people, is that they like the smaller ones. Easier to carry, it's lighter. The keyboard that Logitech makes for it, they love it.
Right.
So now I'm kind of curious to see, will that still work on this new form factor? I don't know. I know the Smart Connector is still there.
Yeah, but the size is a little different. So
is it? Yeah.
It'll be interesting. Let's circle back to the iPad in just a few minutes here.
Sure.
Just wanted to finish off here talking a little bit about iOS. You touched upon drag and drop. Give it a touch. Boy, I was amazingly impressed about what Craig Federici, I think it was, that was doing the demonstration earlier today, how he was able to tap 3 photos and just drag them right into an email with a matter of just a couple of touches.
And that's the exact kind of use case that I needed for. I send pictures quite frequently, using the camera as a way of capturing documents, and tools have become so handy with these devices. But it's always the email, one attachment, then go back, attach again, go back, attach again. It was frustrating, and so I would avoid sending more than one attachment at a time because of that. Well, now, get ready, your inboxes. I'm going to be sending a lot of stuff your way.
Yeah, exactly. The Apple Pencil, they did some enhancements. I know they did mention that the accuracy is even better on the new iPad as well as with the Pencil. It's I think 20 milliseconds.
20 millisecond latency.
Latency was set, and then the being able to do much even more enhanced instant markups, which you weren't able to do that on a PDF before. And then the other thing was instant notes. I mean, you were able to already do notes with the Pencil in the previous version, 10.3. You got it right from the lock screen. You can take notes immediately. You actually could put this stuff in a diagram, like they give an example of a diagram of directions to somebody's house. It's all right there with the Pencil. As well as inline drawing. So they've really expanded some great things with the Pencil. The other big thing is, of course, we've already had this pretty much before. As I was a big Real fan using Scanner Pro and PDF Expert. Right. I talked about that in the last episode of PDF Expert. But you now have it built in. You weren't able to do this before. Be able to scan and sign a document right in Notes automatically. Apple finally just actually included this as part of the Notes.
Yeah, I think in the ease of use when you take a screenshot or you grab those documents for markup.
Right.
I mean, they show the pen tips and the colors right there at the bottom of the screen. Again, it's very basic in terms of interface, but that's what I needed to do. I need just, in your example, is a perfect one. I've sent maps many times, and people are like, "Well, I want to highlight which side of the street you need to park on because you can only park on one side of the street in my house," and that makes it so easy to do that. And I used to pull it into another app, and that's fine. But if it's built in like that, I think it enhances that productivity. And again, knowing the large base of users that I support, that's the type of functionality that I've been really yearning for.
Yep. And so those features alone in the iPad were pretty awesome. A couple other announcements they made with it. Now they've introduced in iOS 11 is the augmented reality or AR, new framework that brings the augmented reality to the millions of iOS devices and allowing the developers to actually easily build some unparalleled AR experiences. And during the keynote, I was blown away with the little spaceships and the little world that just popped up on the
Darth
table.
Vader
and Darth Vader, and they blew up a building, and just pretty amazing. To have that expansion with that in itself was just mind-blowing. Right?
Yeah, and it's one of those relationships that Apple has with some of these professional studios too. I mean, you have basically the vice president coming out from ILM talking about what he's doing, and so not only can they show this cool technology, but they have the rights to use a Darth Vader in Star Wars into a demo like that. How cool is that?
Yeah.
But it was slick, it was smooth, it was engaging, and I'm very curious to see what it is. I mean, I'm still a little bit torn on the whole VR world. I mean, wearing those goggles is still a little bit something, but it's. I think these are just steps on our way to a much more immersive world. And if they can do that now, I mean, with basically mobile devices, can you imagine the type of horsepower? Well, we heard some other announcements. We won't get into them really here, but they're just making leaps and bounds progress. Where by 2020 they could have a real VR environment that doesn't require these goofy looking headsets.
Yeah, exactly. Some more essentials that were both iPad and iPhone, including Apple Pay. They had some cool enhancements there. The person-to-person pay.
Hey, Dave, you owe me money.
Yeah, you send me the $20, and then all of a sudden it sees that you've put that in a message to somebody, and it allows, hey, here's Apple Pay. Do you want to pay him $28?
Yeah.
And you just tap it. The same thing with Apple Pay Cash. They came up with a little. You can create a wallet card, and you can get paid, and it's securely kept in a Pay Cash card.
And I think that was really interesting. Is that they provide that utility, which again, you're kind of bypassing the bank again, right? Apple's you're entrusting Apple to hold your cash, but in general, they, because of their privacy and security consciousness, I think I wouldn't think twice about utilizing it. I think it'd be great, and I like the idea. I mean, there are services today that I use that take fees or they're cumbersome. Well, I mean, based upon the demo, it's super easy. I mean, I could just basically text message you. It'll understand if I say, hey, I need to pay you $20 or you owe me $20. Right. It will bring that right up into that little, what do they call it, the Siri intelligence bar.
Right.
And
the suggestions.
Yeah, it'll come right up for you. I mean, taking away that friction just makes it so handy to do. Because how many times, we were at dinner tonight and we ended up splitting the bill because neither of us had cash. Well, we had both had Apple Pay at the ready for that particular transaction. Would have worked.
It would. So more enhancements they did with photos, and Photos is going to be as huge as ever. Coming up with things with live photos, a lot more differences, edits, including loops, bounce, and long exposure. Going through and you can make it into a fun loop. Hey, what a surprise! You can create a GIF.
Yeah, right.
That's been around forever, but now you can do that with the live photos that you take. The camera's got some enhanced adjustments as well. I don't want to get too much deep into that, but they did do some great improvements with the camera.
And you figure some of that is because they know what hardware is coming with the next generation devices. Right. So I'm very excited about that. Of course, the iPads did get enhanced cameras, so we know they'll have them.
Right.
But the iPhone will have something really, truly amazing later this year. But when I saw the way the ease of use at using photos was great. But I think the feature in photos that I was most excited about was synchronizing across devices faces. How many times do we not have that option? So you get frustrated because I've done it on the iPad, I haven't done it on my iPhone, and now it'll synchronize automatically across. I think that's a huge benefit across. Plus, it should also help save, because that's one of the downsides. That the machines today, if you get a new device, it has to scan through everything, and it just totally burns your battery and processing power for a few days as it indexes thousands and thousands of photos.
Yep. So yeah, photos has improved. Other thing I was kind of surprised about, and I like the fact that they enhanced the App Store. They really modeled it around the way the design of the Apple Music section was. So design is neat. It's got a lot easier to discover apps, because the App Store was very aged. I think they hadn't done an update in that in a long time.
It's been 9 years since they rolled it out. Now, did they get specifically into search at all?
No, they didn't. I don't recall them talking about too much of search.
Because that's one area that I hope does improve.
Yeah, because that was always a challenge to try to find an app when you're looking for something.
Especially if it's new, it seems like it'd be buried unless you had the exact right phrase. I think the highlighting of games, the highlighting itself of every app that's there with these large screenshots and videos, the stories that go with them, I think are great, because they really allow the developers to enhance what they're trying to basically promote in their app. And you're not going to be so buried. Now, you're still going to have some discoverability between there. But I think in general, this does highlight, kind of that initial, and they even said it at the keynote today, was that kind of first year, second year where it was kind of fun. You go to the App Store every day, just, hey, what's new? That's kind of back with this feature. Pretty excited about that. Now, David, I didn't know if you caught the one game that they were highlighting, Monument Valley 2.
I saw that, and I also got that they sent the email out later in the day to download it right away. I have not played it or looked at it yet.
Yeah, so I actually downloaded it during the keynote. It wasn't in the old App Store and all that. I love the original game. It's extremely clever, great graphics and music. But again, it's nice that they have the ability to highlight these type of games, because they should get an audience. I mean, this is the Us 2, I think, is the name of the developers. It's just a couple guys, and they have a couple of graphic people that they work with. Great story, because they are indie developers, and they've done so well, and they continue to add storylines to their original versions. They're adding now this new version. So you can, there's always talk that the market is saturated. Well, not for creative people that really want to give it the effort. So highlighting it is great. So I think, David, you're absolutely right. The App Store refresh, it was something that was long needed.
Well overdue. Yes. So we'll go through a couple more features with iOS. And like I said, we could probably spend an hour all by itself just on iOS 11. Messages, they did some updates with the apps.
I love stickers.
The stickers, and they did the app drawer, so it's much easier less taps to get to things, which I'm happy to see.
How annoyed are you when I send you stickers all day long?
No, I enjoy them. So
the White Sox stickers I send you.
I send you Cubs. So. Siri, that was some major improvements on Siri. Like I said, we'll talk about the HomePod later, but that was well overdue. I mean, Siri was just way behind the time when it comes to their competitors like the Amazon Echo and the Google Home and those types of devices. As far as talking into it, it's becoming, as they title it, naturally more helpful. iOS 11 is going to make it a lot easier to work with Siri, and doing translation is one of the big things that they added.
That was amazing.
That was huge. And
I mean, they have if I recall, it's English, German, Chinese, French, Italian, Spanish, and did I say Chinese? And again, Tim Cook's playing into that Chinese market, which I think is a smart play still, and that really, and I look at it from how I use my devices, and David, you and I both travel a fair amount.
Right.
And these are the type of things that are huge, because there are times when it would be helpful to do that. And sure, I can pull up Google Translate or some of the other apps, but have it built in to the device, I think is a great move.
Yep.
And it shows that they are still making a lot of changes with Siri. I mean, I find in general the voice recognition for me is quite excellent.
Yeah.
The frustrations I had were around the context, which seems to be a lot focus of what they were talking about today,
right.
is asking it certain questions, the follow-up questions, the way that they kept using machine learning will help try to better identify what you're saying as opposed to just the words, I think is key here. So I'll be very excited to try it. I know we're going to talk about HomePod later, but I think part of what I forget to do is just simply to use Siri sometimes.
Right, me too.
And the more opportunities I can do it, because there are times I'm like, oh yes, this is a perfect opportunity to use Siri, and I'm like, well, I should be using it all the time to dictate memos or do certain types of searches, and I don't. I type, even on my iPhone where there's a small keyboard. So well, we'll talk about that more with HomePod, but I'm very excited that this all seems to be integrated down, for future development as well.
So a couple more things I want to just call out a little bit is one of the big changes is Control Center, and you can now you can really customize it and make your own. You weren't able to customize it in iOS 10, iOS 11. Oh my gosh, it's what a difference! I haven't had a chance much to play with it yet, but it's really huge. I saw you were playing with it a little bit earlier tonight, and like I said, I just installed it on a device not too earlier today, so I haven't had a chance. But
yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I think this is going to be a little bit of a learning curve for all of us, because things that we didn't have 2 revisions ago, and then they added in the cards, which was an improvement, but it was a little bit clumsy. And so putting it all on the main screen there, I think is going to be helpful. Certain things like sliding up the volume and the brightness, those are easy. But one of the things I noticed is that like my Wi-Fi or Bluetooth didn't appear to be highlighted, so I thought they weren't on. They weren't connected, but they were still on, which means I could actively disconnect from a Wi-Fi spot that might be a little wonky without having to shut off Wi-Fi altogether.
Right.
I'm like, oh, perfect. This is the disconnect option built into the Control Center. That's a huge deal for me. Same thing with Bluetooth. Sometimes I want to disconnect the device because I'm switching locations, and I'm at least at the initial outset. I mean, things can change. It is a beta, but very excited that things that they didn't necessarily highlight, they seem to be thinking the way I am thinking, which is always a good thing.
And the key word is customize. You are now able to you now can customize the Control Center to make it your own, because you were stuck on whatever they had with the last Control Center. Now you can customize it. You can add a voice memos control if you do that a lot, or if you do HomeKit, you can add dim the lights. 3D Touch Control Center there's so many other things you can add to it now compared to what you could before. So it's going to take a little getting used to, because it is laid out a little different. So
there is, and if you look at the nature of the keynote, 6 major themes that they had to cram in 2.5 hours. It's the same thing when you look at Control Center and how we use our devices. There's so much we can do, and how do you basically boil it down to the basic needs that you or I have in terms of how we want to use these devices, but that power's there. For what you, David, might need and I don't, how do you have that accessible where I don't need it and I can put something that I want to use out there?
Right.
So it's, I suspect this beta period will be extremely important for Apple, because they're going to really see how people are utilizing this and hopefully make some changes accordingly. One thing, David, I was going to mention, if you don't mind, was Maps. They've done some enhancements on that in the past, but they're really getting into that very detailed hyperlocation type awareness, which I'm thrilled about, and I'm hoping they continue down that path. They specifically mentioned 2 things, of which I both enjoy, shopping at malls and airports.
Yeah.
And airports, for me, I know O'Hare as well as anybody does, but I go to other airports and I have no clue how to find things. And they're like, well, it's in Terminal B down the hall. Well, what does that mean? And to pull up a hyper-accurate map that will show me literally where I'm at down to the foot level, I think is extremely beneficial. And that will continue down the path, because, David, you and I were talking about this earlier. Go to a ball game, right? How about you have a map of Wrigley Field, and I want to get certain types of food, or I want to find a vendor to buy a hat. That you could get down to that level, and it's a combination of using more accurate maps. But I also suspect there's technology behind it, and I know this is actually included in ballparks. Are the iBeacons?
Right.
They don't really talk about them anymore, but I know they're still actively in use. And when you walk into certain areas, and I still see this at Apple stores, I see it at the ballparks, and I see this at other places. And I think I've seen them at airports because my phone will pop up an interesting notification. I'm like, I'm here. So I think, again, you've got a lot of people focused on that. They also did some other work, speed limits, lane guidance, and a very interesting feature, which is the do not disturb while driving.
That's my last topic.
Okay.
So you're ahead of me here. Go for it.
So I think, and again, they're going to encourage the use of it. They're not going to force it down our throat. But basically, if you're using your iPhone or iPad while you're driving, then they use Bluetooth and triangulation and a few other neat tricks to determine you're moving, that they know that you shouldn't be using your device. So what do you have? It'll give you a pop-up saying, hey.
Just warns you.
Yeah. And if you turn it on, it'll basically have a blank screen until you stop.
Right.
But if you're a passenger, you can get through that. They include ways of completely ignoring all your text messages.
Yep.
But there's an option to break through as well. So I think they've really thought through this. I think it's smart. I mean, in talking to people, texting while driving, we know it's all dangerous, yet people still do it. And it's something I'm glad they're incorporating to the core functionality.
Yeah, me too. Like you touched on the last topic I want to hit on is iOS 11. There's so much other things we could talk about, but we've got a few more things.
Some other future.
Yeah, maybe future episodes we could hit on it. What I wanted to do is tell everybody what the minimum requirements are for iOS 11. So they've pretty much put anything before the iPhone 5S is end of life. So sad if you have a 5 or the 4S. You're at the end of the road with those versions.
What are you doing with those devices? Come on, upgrade.
The 5C is the other one that's going to be gone. So it runs on the 5S, the 6, 6 Plus, 6S, 6S Plus, the SE, which is the high-end model, so that's perfectly fine. I have that. I installed it as a spare. The 7 and the 7 Plus. On the iPad line, they're covering both Airs, the Air and the Air 2. The iPad Mini 2, 3, and 4 are covered. The 5th generation
iPad Mini.
They didn't kill off. 2, 3, and 4 are still going. The 5th gen iPad, of course, and of course all iPad Pros. And then one thing you heard that isn't mentioned is the iPad 4. That one now is going to be end of life. So one thing else I wanted to mention is there's going to be no more 32-bit apps. So all the apps, the developers were required to make them 64-bit, so to make them faster, more efficient, less overhead. So any old apps that you had before you hadn't updated, or they did, or if the app developer didn't update it, it's going to be gone.
And they've had essentially 2 years to.
Yeah, they've been told that this has to happen. So
yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a couple apps that. And what people have seen in the current release of iOS is it'll pop up a message saying the app itself may not work quite up to snuff. But there are a few apps out there that I know the developers have stopped developing it, and it'll be too bad that those won't run anymore. Yep. But again, Apple is very good at forcing us to move forward into the future, sometimes kicking and screaming, but I think it's still the right thing to do.
Yep.
I always look at it as an opportunity. And the one reason I gave on a different podcast was I had a nice shopping loyalty card app that I liked. Mm-hmm. It's not being updated, and so the whole 32-bit to 64 forced me to look at a new option. And I actually found one that was way better, but I just hadn't looked for it. So.
Right, so now you're forced.
Exactly.
So that's our take on iOS 11. Like I said, if you have any comments or some things that you had, don't forget you could contact us and to let us know if you had any questions related to iOS 11. So as we did touch a little bit about the iPad Pro 10.5, I know, Barry, you were really excited about this, and I wanted you to kind of give me your insights of what you thought really stood out with the iPad Pro 10.
Yeah, I mean,
5-inch.
Yeah, I'm iPad biased, but I really like these devices, and
I do too.
And again, I see what people in our field are using these devices for. They're small, they're light, they're reliable, they're cellular enabled,
right?
And they can do their jobs with this. So to give a screen size that's bigger, more real estate for them, in essentially the same form factor, I think is extremely exciting.
Yeah.
One of the specific hardware specs that they were talking about is that the screen itself is incredible. Now, when the 9.7-inch iPad Pro came out, which was after the 12.9, it actually had a better screen than the 12.9, which made me insanely jealous. But if you look at them side by side, it is one of those comparisons you're going, wow, the screen's just more vibrant, and it's just seemingly more crisp. Now they'll both have this new screen.
Right.
The refresh rate is 120 megahertz.
Hertz.
And So it's going to refresh the screen 120 times a second. And they did a couple of things. For one thing, if you scroll, it's going to be buttery smooth. You won't have stuttering. You won't have, these effects that look kind of like stretched or whatever. They'll be super smooth. Because of that, the iPad, as you mentioned, the pencil will work even better than before. But it's also smart to recognize you don't always need high resolution or refresh rates. That if you're looking at something relatively static, it'll bump it down. I think it was all the way down to 24 hertz.
Yeah, I think so.
And so that's a huge way of saving battery. Again, that integration between the hardware and the software, Apple has that absolutely locked down. And I think you're going to see 10 plus battery life easily on these devices, considering how small they are. That really is amazing. They talked again about the cores, the 6-core CPU and the 12-core GPU, and the A10X Fusion chip.
A10 Fusion chip, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because they don't talk about megahertz of the chips and some of those specs necessarily, but they do talk about how truly powerful they are. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's 500 times faster than the original iPad.
It's crazy.
Really, it is crazy. And they keep pushing it. Again, the integration of the chip, the hardware, the software, all makes it a very exciting device. So those, I believe they're actually available to order now and should be out shipping in about a week.
Yeah, that they're available. And it's a pretty phenomenal device. And I said that the screen size is going to make a bit of a difference. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not sure yet. I mean, I didn't look on the site. They're still going to sell the 9.7 inch, or is that going to
actually,
disappear?
I don't know. So if you want to check while I vamp.
Yeah, I'm checking.
But, it brings up an interesting dilemma for me because I refresh the hardware every couple of years where I work, and we're coming up in that cycle at the end of this year. So timing-wise, we should be good.
It's gone.
It's gone.
So 9.5
well, I just made
longer.
that decision much easier for me.
Yes.
So, obviously, one of the joys that I'll have is testing these devices side by side, and I'm thrilled with the 12.9 inch screen because I love the split screen. I love the ability to have a lot of information available to me. But maybe this 9.7 is enough where I can go, because I wouldn't, if I can slim it down a bit, I'd be happy to try it.
Well, and then the other thing they did was that the edge to edge it's much thinner. Mm-hmm. It's 40% more screen than it was before.
Right.
So your edge to edge looks a lot nicer. As far as specs goes, I mean, they did do a storage bump, so now the base model is 64 gigabytes, which is pretty awesome, and you're getting around the same price point.
Wow.
64 gigs on the 10.5 is $629, so that's a pretty fair price considering. But it goes up to 256 and 512 gigabytes. Right. So if you're really insane and want to have a lot of storage, I mean, 512, that's expensive.
That's a lot. I do find, interestingly enough, on my 12.9 iPad Pro, I do run into the 128 limit.
I've gotten close. That's what my is at 128. So.
And so I can easily see going up to 256. Would I use up more if I had it? Maybe. I mean, you do think about the one thing that the iPad Pros do so well are store video.
Right.
And whether it's home video, TV shows, movies. I mean, I do like to have a bunch with me. Again, when I travel, it's nice to have. But, in this day and age, you have to think about how do we watch things. We don't watch in the traditional methods much, or at least I should say. Everybody's got different specs, but
right.
I will download all 10 episodes of Westworld before I go on a long trip and end up binging them because it's a great thing to do on an airplane. Well, that one show can eat up 20, 30 gig right there. And then, of course, you have to have the entire Lord of the Rings, Star Wars trilogies, and a few others as just as backup. So I could definitely see 256 being the way to go. I'm not a graphics professional, but someone like you, Dave, who works a lot with audio, and you do some other stuff, you might consider going all the way to 512.
Yeah, it's possible. I don't. That's a lot.
Oh, come on!
Yeah, it's too expensive. So,
all right, we all have to encourage Dave peer pressure to get the 512.
No. So yeah, I think that's, unless you've got any other things we missed about the iPad.
No, I'm very excited about it.
Me too.
And I think again by the leveraging some more pro features, I think we'll start to see the software side from the developers. The OmniFocuses of the world,
right.
The Omni Group, and those companies. Well, I think we'll take it to the next level.
So let's touch a little bit. There wasn't too much excitement to us on the watch, and the Apple Watch. So, I mean, they didn't do any hardware announcements, so it's all software announcements. Have you upgraded your watch yet or no?
No, I actually just got the notification. I upgraded 3.3 beta something just the other day, and I
Oh, 'cause
was
you're on
meant
the
to
beta.
do it, and now I'll do this. That's the one that I'm nervous about.
Yeah,
Because if I
figure.
brick an iPhone or an iPad, I know how to recover for that. If I brick my watch, I have to take it to the Apple store.
Yeah.
So I think I will wait a couple of days.
You
just,
should.
Just that one I'll wait just in case. I'll wait. I'll watch online if there are any horror stories that might make me stop. Otherwise, give me a week. Oh, I should do it after my next trip.
Yeah, don't do it like
Yeah, but there were some neat things. I wish they were a little bit more open on the watch faces. I think that's one thing that I get. Apple's that's their mentality all the way, right? We control the look and the feel. There's a few new watch faces. They have the kaleidoscope face.
And then the Toy Story.
That was a big one,
Yeah.
and that was cute. I liked it. I think people will enjoy that. And I do like. They mentioned another one called Siri Intelligence.
And that's what I'm going to touch on. Yeah, please, let's talk about that.
And that one, I think that one really speaks to me because it's really looking at my day-to-day, meaning my calendar, my activity, other things that I typically do that my phone or my watch knows about me. And I'm thinking about what I do on a typical day when I travel. When am I going to get to the airport? Where are my tickets? Where do I want to have lunch at the airport? Boarding passes. All this are things that I use my watch these days, but they're separate.
Right.
Now, with the way I understand the Siri Intelligence watch face will work, that should all be there, and I can scroll basically across the different features. So it's going to tell me it's going to take you 25 minutes to get to O'Hare, and then if I leave my car there, it'll know where I parked it, and I pull up my boarding pass to go through TSA. I've actually found scanning it off the watch works really well.
Yeah,
and most of the devices now are compatible. There's still a few older ones that won't work.
Right.
But to have all that, and then just there's other things that they're going to bring in to my day to day. The health aspects that they incorporate into this, telling me I needed to walk another mile to close a ring or whatever it is.
Right.
That can all be part of the Siri Intelligence watch face, and I like that because I think to me it's become like a mini admin on my watch.
Right.
So pretty excited about that. I'm curious to see how customizable that one is. I think we'll have to play with that and see.
The way the OS is going to be customizable. It looks like all the other stuff, like the Apple Pay Cash, is going to work on the watch as well, which is great. There's an all-day assistant that you could work with person-to-person payments. That's what that is, among other features that they threw out there. But all in all, I think a lot of also was the focus on was a lot of the health apps. And I think that's I mean, we know that's the hottest reason why a lot of people have these watches is because of being able to measure the health and
Absolutely
and your heart rate. And they said, I've read some stories about the heart rate monitor on the watch is probably one of the most accurate of all the smart watches out there. So
yeah,
and obviously the hardware makes a difference. The Series 2 is the high end of them. I tell you what, and I'm sure you can attest to this too, the battery life on the Series 2 is absolutely amazing. You could go almost 2 full days without having to charge it, unless you're going absolutely crazy with fitness.
Or Pokemon Go.
Or Pokemon Go, yeah. Well, yeah, you're good at that, but that's a whole other story.
Yes, but you're right, and they're really. I mean, I think they're getting it right. The watch, they're not defocusing the apps, but they're strengthening the areas that people are truly using it. And I think, David, you're nailing on the head here with the fitness. I'm not a workout kind of person. They did mention something very interesting, which is that I think it was 80% of people that make fitness machines will be making Apple Watch enabled training equipment. Right. And so the watch and the device, whether it's a treadmill or step climber or whatever, can exchange information, the heart rate monitoring, how much the incline, how many steps you're doing, and integrates that together, which I think is great because, again, that in itself won't make you necessarily work out, but I like that ability. And what the watch has made me do is I focus a lot on my steps and my stair climbing. And so while I may not go to the gym to work out for an hour, I will make a point of making sure I get a certain number of steps in every day. And Apple's pretty good about this, and I think they made some cool little adjustments to their rings. They really are emphasizing closing those rings, and it's silly, but it's effective. But what I also like is that you still have good third-party access to this data. I'll highlight, he goes under the Twitter name _ David Smith, and he creates several apps, Activity++, Sleep++, Pedometer++. There's a few pluses I'm missing.
Pluses here.
But first off, he's a fantastic developer, huge supporter of the community, but he really takes it to that next level. And I've used Pedometer plus for a while. Well, what happens when I meet my step goal? The whole watch fills with confetti. And it's just little things like that are just a little smile on my face that goes, yeah, I did a good job, and it's recognized with that. I'm really curious to see where they go with this. They referenced, and David, I don't remember if you remember, they referenced the glucose monitoring.
Yeah, they did. There was a lot of discussion about that, but nothing was referenced during the keynote today.
Just other than there's a tie-in, right?
I don't think that I recall. I'm going to go back and watch it again, but I didn't see anything mentioned at all about that, because I think that's still in testing, and I think they want to keep that on the DL.
Yeah,
I bet that will get announced at the fall event when the iPhone is announced. So
there's a new iPhone coming out.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think there is.
Okay, well, it didn't happen today, though.
No, it didn't.
No, and again, it's easier for us to say. I mean, this is an iOS-focused podcast, but there are a couple key figures that I thought are worth highlighting, in that already. So iOS 11 came out today in the beta, so we're going to start to lose a little bit of this. But 86% of active devices are on iOS 10.
I know that number was just blowing my mind.
That's staggering.
Versus Android was what, 7%?
Yeah, but it really does. I mean, I know Apple kind of pushes it down your throat, and some people will complain about device deprecation early. Although you said they go all the way back to the 5S. That's a lot of devices.
That's far back.
And it does allow us to move forward. And again, you and I both can and have rolled our eyes at the fact we still have Windows XP systems that we have to support, that there's these older systems out there because they're not forced to move forward. So sometimes I really do appreciate this.
I do.
And not only are you forcing it down their throat, but the customer satisfaction rates are off the charts. 96% are satisfied. And I measure metrics all the time for projects and service desks. Nobody gets 96%. And that speaks a lot about the company. Are they perfect? Of course not. And they do make mistakes. But I think what they do really well is that they do learn from their mistakes. And this iteration of iOS is a big value here, where you're seeing that they've learned a lot from. I mean, when was the big change? iOS 7, I think, was
7 to 8. Yeah, that was huge.
It was huge, and they're still refining, and they're making improvements. And when they make a big change like Control Center, and it was good, but it wasn't that great. Right. Now it's seemingly a lot better. Split screen was good. Split screen was awesome, but then app picking was horrible. Yeah. And now you've got a feature that looks really positive. So I'm very excited about this. Again, they're still pushing it hard. They're doing some neat things that are difficult, like with Siri, and I think we'll see where it goes with this. Yeah.
All right, let's kind of go to the home stretch here. We'll touch about a 1 minute on tvOS.
Okay, that's about all they covered.
Yeah, that's all about they gave. So, really, the only thing that stood out, and I was pretty happy about it, was the fact that Amazon Prime Video will now be available on the tvOS. About time, indeed. I'm sick of having to maintain all these multiple devices, and I mean, they always had the iPad app and they have the iPhone app, but they never have that on tvOS, and that's the whole reason why you want to watch these videos a lot of times is you want to watch it on your TV without having to AirPlay your iPad to the Apple TV. What's the point of having the Apple TV? So that nothing else really was highlighted on the tvOS front. Because my thinking really with what Apple's doing is they're just still sitting back and seeing where that goes, because I know they were having some challenges. They wanted to get more content. He did talk a little bit about the content and how many channels that are available now. I think there's something like 50 channels now available on tvOS.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good amount. I mean, it's an interesting mix, and it's a slow evolution here, which is okay. You're dealing with the content providers. It's not a tricky matter, but I do like there is a mix, and I think we're still far away from where we would like to be. But I look at how I typically use my Apple TV, and probably number one is Netflix. Amazon Prime is great because that would be great. HBO, House of Cards. House of Cards?
House of Cards on Netflix.
Netflix, right. What's HBO? That's Westworld.
Westworld and Silicon Valley for me. But.
Yeah. But again, that's how I consume this stuff. I like, if I'm going to sit down, I like the fact that I can do it on my Apple TV. Right. If I'm on the road, I like the fact that it synchronizes with my iPad, so I know exactly where I left off on an episode. That's huge. Yep. Showtime, if I have to get my Twin Peaks plug in here. And so it's interesting where this is going. But I also still use it for some games.
Okay.
And there's a couple party games I play.
Yeah. We played it.
Yep. And that's nice because it's the same device. So the TV's all the same. I don't have to worry about switching inputs or whatever. It's there. So I think, again, hopefully we'll see some iterations.
Yep.
I would love to see a 4K Apple TV.
Yeah.
Maybe the fall. I don't, there's that one's still a wild card, right? Because I think this is now Apple moves at its own pace, and that's fine. I can live with it. Frankly, my wallet prefers that they will go slowly. We had the AirPods late last year.
Love
this
the
year,
AirPods.
of course, we got iPhones. That's every year. iPad's great. And we have one last thing if we're ready to switch over.
Yes, we are. And they did call it, instead of one, what did they used to do? There was
One
one
more
more thing. It's now one last thing.
Yes.
And that was, they announced the HomePod.
Yes.
Now, as soon as I started watching it, they were building it up. I said, "Oh, they're going to announce it! I can't believe it!" Because I had thought for sure this was going to be something that was there's no way.
Right.
But there were 6 things, so I mean, you counted out all the OSs, and
And that was smart because it really built up that anticipation.
it did. So, so what they really did was, and we're going to keep it the kind of the Reader's Digest version of this because they
And
did.
you're going to have to help me on this one because I actually missed most of this keynote.
What it is, it's just they basically reinvented how a speaker really is going to work in your home. I think it's like a 7-inch size little device.
Mm-hmm.
They put an A8 chip in it, so it's got the chip for system running because it does do Siri and it has a Siri light. They did add a high excursion woofer in the top, and they had a 7-way tweeter at the bottom of it.
Isn't that kind of flipped from your norm?
Yeah, it is because the Amazon Echo isn't anywhere near what this does. Now the other thing that really of all the highlights of this is it's really engineered to adjust to the sounds of your room. So of course they're going to want you to buy 2 of them because you have one on each side. But they did show it where the device would sit in the middle of the room or sit on the stand, and then your couch and everything is right in front of it. But the sounds would adjust to the room. So it had a much better design as far as how it actually sensed how the sound was where you stood when you were talking it. So it's kind of like it senses the room and the tunes and the music all by itself when you were sitting. And I'm kind of reading off of what they say on the website here, but so that was one of the biggest highlights of the way the sound emits from it. And of course, they added a lot of the other stuff that you get from the Amazon Echo. You can listen to news and the podcasts and the music. But the biggest key is it's Apple Music. It's pure Apple's music, and that's if you're in that ecosystem, this is going to be an ideal device for you.
And I think that. I mean, they're playing to a core strength here, right? That,
exactly.
You go back to the customer service stats and the number of devices out there. So, I mean, it's probably a dud to assume that you and I will order one at some point. The question is how many. Dave, you'll get 3 or 4, I'm sure.
I'll stick with the
next
Echo.
year, 512 gigabyte iPad. But
you're killing me.
But I'm good at spending other people's money.
I know you are.
But I do like what this brings. Now, I was a very early adapter of the Amazon Echo. I was a pre-order because I had Prime.
So was I.
I like it.
I do.
But I also think about it's handy when I need it. I mean, it's so easy to set reminders and alarms. And almost every night when I go to bed, I check the weather. I have all sorts of apps. I've got Siri, but there's something about just speaking out there and saying, Echo, keyword, weather. And that's nice, but it's not tied in closely. I mean, there are ties in with other things. And Amazon does have a very open ecosystem, which I do like. And I think there's pros and cons to that. They have much more flexibility. I'm a little concerned about the security. And I'm very comfortable that Apple's security model is one that, and they even said they won't listen other than for the trigger word. And then at that point, it's truly listening to what you're asking. So that's good. Now, of course, proof will be once it's out and tested.
Right.
Because you're going to see a lot of videos of, Hola Google and Hola Amazon and Hola Apple. How do they all respond? And if Apple's pronouncements today about machine learning and context come through, I think they'll be on par or exceeding what some of these other ones. And then you take the ability of, you have an Apple Music subscription. We have 40,000 tracks or 40 million tracks to play.
Right.
Great. And here's your calendar. Here's your email. Now, did they say how third parties might work with this?
No, they didn't. There wasn't any
That's-
specifics. So I have a feeling it's right now. It's just in the Apple ecosystem. So they didn't get too much detail.
And it wouldn't be unlike Apple to say, you know what, we're playing in our pool first for a year, and then we'll update the operating system next year, and then they'll have 7 things to talk about, including the home, the home hub. Was that what they're calling it? No,
For Apple?
HomePod.
HomePod.
Yeah, I mean, they'll update the operating system to incorporate third parties because probably the peak thing that I would use it for is listening to podcasts.
Right.
And I don't use Apple Podcasts.
And you could use them to podcast. I don't either. I use Downcast.
Right, and I use Overcast. So both those apps that we use are great apps that have the ability to synchronize across devices. If it could synchronize across the HomePod, that would be fantastic. I don't see that coming out of the gate, but I think probably it'd be a 2018 type deal. And I think that would be huge. But, it goes back to how much I use these devices. I don't know. I go back to what I said towards the beginning of our podcast today, where if I get into the habit of using Siri because of the HomePod, I'll use it more on the watch, which means I'll probably use it more on the HomePod. And that's a very positive feedback loop for Apple. I think that's really smart. Now, it does bring up the question of if I say, hola, Siri, will my watch, phone, iPad, and HomePod all respond?
I'll respond at the same time.
And I don't think really anybody knows quite yet. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some levels of smarts built in, but it could also be a cacophony of respondents, and that's not an Apple-like answer. Yep. So I'm hoping that I'm sure they've thought about will they be able to.
For sure. Well, we'll see where it goes. It's not going to be available until December. So
no, I can't wait.
I don't know. $349. That's it's a pretty high price.
A couple bucks every day.
And we'll probably talk about it in future episodes as it gets closer. I'm sure we'll get more details about it as we go. So
it's an exciting. Those devices are exciting, but I think it's part of that. This is cool. How much is it useful? I don't know. If I didn't have an Echo, I'd use my watch more. But when I'm in my kitchen area, I know it's there listening. So there are times when I think about, I should use it more. So I'll ask it for a news update or a sports update. Right. It's nice, but I'm not sure we're there yet. Now, but again, to be fair to all of these manufacturers, the more incorporation you have with HomeKit or IFFT or these other things, so I can do more to the point of, I can, say, I'm going to the airport in 2 hours, and it calls an Uber or Lyft for me. It prepares something, at the airport for me, because at some point I assume they're going to get rid of boarding passes and all that. That you just go through and they iris scan you or something. Yeah. That it can, send me a notification an hour in that's saying, okay, your car will be here in X amount of time. Your boarding gate is here. All this information you could consolidate down this individual asks into something simple that these devices could do. At least that's kind of how I see it. I mean, it goes into the Star Trek future, right? And what do they do on the Enterprise when they ask the computer for things? They get a whole slew of information that they didn't necessarily ask for, but somehow they knew the context. So I'm very, very excited about it. And what do you think? I just saw a picture. It looks like it's in space gray and white.
Space gray and white.
Yep. So what do you think? I saw some jokes about them reusing the Mac Pro container.
That's it. I said that right away on the podcast this morning, this afternoon. It looks almost like a Mac Pro shell. They're either reusing the shells they got left over that they aren't selling. So in closing with WWDC, I was very excited and impressed of what was announced today. It was probably one of the more entertaining and enjoyable discussions that keynote today than I've experienced in quite a while. Because Apple really had some dull discussions in the last couple times that we've talked about it. So, but I think we got some great exciting things ahead of us with these devices, and it's a great thing. Before we go, I wanted to mention one thing. What we're involved in is MacStock.
Yes.
And MacStock 2017 is coming up. I can't believe it's 39 days. I'm looking on the website right now. He's got that counter. I shouldn't be looking at that because I still have to finish my presentation.
Yes.
For those of you who don't know what MacStock is, it's MacStock 2017. This is the third annual. It was started by Mike Potter and our own co-host here, Barry Falk. And He hosts the Mac. We're calling it the Mac Mingle,
Midwest
right?
Mac Mingle, yeah.
For the food part of it, but the reason why you want to come to MacStock is just all the great speakers and all the great chances you'll have to network. People like myself I'm speaking. Chuck Joyner, Allison Sheridan, Dave Hamilton, David Cohen, just to name a few.
Your normal co-host Melissa will be
Melissa
there.
I should be mentioning her. Yeah,
and she'll be doing her session with Jody Spangler again.
Spangler,
and they
yeah.
always do a very entertaining one.
Very entertaining, and it's just a nice, cozy conference because you get to be able to talk to pretty much, if you don't, everybody at the conference. There's a lot of great people that are speaking, as well as all the attendees. They're there to want to learn things, and they want to network and be able to meet them. All the speakers are very approachable. I'm very approachable. I'll be doing a discussion on efficiency on iOS. So this is just very timely that WWDC came out. So now I'm going to have to tweak my presentation a little more because there's some new things I didn't know about because I pretty much had my presentation ready to go, but now there's going to be a bit more to talk about. And then plus, I was fortunate enough to be able to do a deeper dive on that, so maybe I can touch more upon some of the iOS 11 things that we're talking about. So you can come out just in itself right there.
Yeah, Mike does a great job because he keeps most of the speakers short, limited to 20 minutes. There's a few that might do a double at 40, but he's really giving the option of these deeper dives this year. I know he did a couple as a kind of a trial last year. It worked out well.
Yeah, they went off real well.
And that way, you can kind of pop in and out. If there's something that may not be of direct interest to you, you can go out or you can go do a deeper dive. It's a beautiful campus, the McHenry County College, so it's a nice place just to relax. And what he's also doing is he's doing a swap this year.
Right.
So you can bring some hardware in if you want to swap it with some other older hardware, or maybe it's newer hardware you're just trying to get rid of, or someone else might bring in something. So I think that's a great idea to try this year. And it runs 2 nights. It's July 15th, or 2 days, I should say. July 15th and 16th in 2017. And at night, on Saturday night, is the Midwest Mac Mingle. So wanted to kind of kick it up a notch, take it to 11, just like Tim Cook did earlier today. And what I wanted to do was just to throw a nice party. Again, it's not like some crazy blowout. It's really just for people to have fun. And so in downtown Woodstock, Illinois, so it's only a couple miles from the conference. It's a beautiful town square. And those you may know, they filmed Groundhog Day there.
Right.
And so it's a nice area, and we have a space rented out. And we're going to have light bites and some drinks. It's going to be very casual. We'll go from about 6 to 11. And one of the, it's not a surprise, but one of the fun things that we'll be doing this year is we'll have a 70s cover band. So it gives a little bit of music enhancement as well. So I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah. And the speakers go there. Just about every guest will be there. And it's just a great way of continuing on from a day of learning to just a day of just to kind of relax, have a nightcap. It's open to all ages, so certainly some people are bringing their kids.
Sure.
So we hope to see you there.
Yeah, again, it's July 15th and 16th. It's in Woodstock, Illinois, which is just outside of Chicago. And we'd love to see you. And for all the In Touch with iOS listeners, we do have a coupon code for $30 off, which is In Touch with iOS, all one word. Now, that coupon is going to expire very soon. June 30th is when it'll be expiring. So you have until the end of this month to take advantage of a great conference, and I'm thoroughly looking forward to it again. So
yeah, and it's if you're on the fence or you really haven't thought about going, I highly encourage it. Now, obviously, I'm biased because I'm doing the event, but I wouldn't do the event if I wasn't so excited about it every year. It's the chance to meet old friends, make new friends. It's such a great time, and for me, I'm really one of those people that. I'm just sad when it's all over because I had such a good time and I can't wait for the next year. And again, kudos to Mike Potter for doing this basically single-handedly. He does this amazing job.
You would never know.
Yeah.
He's just amazing.
And so if you're in the area and if you've never been to Chicago, use this as a great opportunity to come in.
Absolutely.
Dave, I'll speak for you for a moment. Dave and I both live in the area. So if you're curious about Chicago, send us an email, drop us a line, and we'll be happy to give some suggestions.
Absolutely.
I don't know about the Cubs. I know the White Sox are in town playing. So if you want to see a minor league team playing a major league ballpark.
All right.
Hey, I'm the Sox fan, so I can say
I'm the Cubs fan.
But there's just so much to do, so we hope to see you there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, with that, I want to wrap up our show, and I want to say thanks for listening, and we hope you are more in touch with iOS after hearing this episode. Subscribe to our podcast in your favorite podcatcher. We're also available on iTunes, and you subscribe to the podcast app. And please tell your friends how you look us up in iTunes, and we look forward to bringing you more useful information in future episodes. And with that, I am David Ginsburg, and you can find me on Twitter at DaveG65. Barry, how can they find you?
Twitter as well. You can find me at FulkB. It's FULKB. You can also send me an email. You can send it at barry@formaceyesonly.com is probably the best route.
Yep.
And again, any questions about MacStock or Chicago, iOS, happy to jump in.
Hit us up.
Yeah, it would be great. So, David, thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks. I can't thank you enough for being a great guest co-host, and keep listening.
My pleasure.
And stay subscribed. Thank you.